Morning. First, before I begin reading today, I'd like to make an announcement. If you are a member of our advanced reading group and you have not been receiving our announcements either of the seminar each week or of the posting of the replay, please do send me an email so that I can get you properly on the mailing list for that. So today I'm going to read from section 5 of Dr. Jung's essay called, Flying Saucers, a Modern Myth of Things Flying in the Sky. And before I really get rolling, I'm going to work on getting a placard up here so that later arrivals will see what we're talking about. But we're talking about Dr. Jung's decision to write on this very late in his life. When he was 82 years old, he finally wrote his essay, which is 120 pages long. If you haven't read or listened to the first few episodes of this essay, please go to the UFO playlist and begin at the beginning. Also, if you want to see how this particularly relates to our modern politics, and especially today with the announcement of Beto O'Rourke joining the presidential campaign, go to part 5, the fifth part of this essay. And there I talk about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and as an archetypal figure, as an archetypal anima figure, who is getting propelled out of the collective unconscious by the Republican Party, and through no fault of her own or no effort of her own. It's just happening. And it appears that the GOP is going to do the same thing for Beto O'Rourke. They seem to be deathly afraid of him, and so he may end up being a archetypal savior figure that the GOP thinks it has to beat early, and they're about to find out that you can't beat an archetype that way. And so we've had an archetype in our presidency for some months now, 27 months, I guess, since our president came on the scene as the trickster. That was an archetype too, and so he played that archetype. But now it appears that we're going to have the savior in Beto O'Rourke, and he's going to be propelled to the front of the class by the GOP itself. And the other one is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who is the archetypal anima figure that we've all been looking for. So it's going to be a very interesting time. And I'm almost done with making my placard, and so I will get that done and up on the screen, and then we can move on. I apologize for this delay. I just slipped my mind. It doesn't pay to get old. So let me see here. Okay. And so just a moment, and it will be up there. I only have about 1 million files on this computer. It's really struggling. Let's see. UFO. So I better try that again. I made the placard, but then it disappeared on me, so I have to find it, or I have to make another one very quickly. I just have to save it in the right place, and it will be golden. Okay, hopefully that did the trick. Okay, I think I got it now. Okay, here it is. UFOs in history. And so I'm going to give that to you, and we will begin. For some reason, the stream health seems to be poor. So if you're having trouble listening to this, please send me a text message on the chat. Just put it up there just in case. Okay. All right. So, UFOs considered in a non-psychological light. Paragraph 781. As I said at the beginning, it was the purpose of this essay to treat the UFOs primarily as a psychological phenomenon. There were plenty of reasons for this, as is abundantly clear from the contradictory and impossible assertions made by the rumor. It is quite right that they should meet with criticism, skepticism, and open rejection, and if anyone should see behind them nothing more than a phantasm that deranges the minds of men and engenders rationalistic resistances, he would have nothing but our sympathy. Indeed, since conscious and unconscious fantasy, and even mendacity obviously play an important role in building up the rumor, we could be satisfied with the psychological explanation and let it rest at that. Unfortunately, however, there are good reasons why the UFOs cannot be disposed of in this simple manner. So far as I know, it remains an established fact, supported by numerous observations, that UFOs have not only been seen visually, but have also been picked up on the radar screen and have left traces on the photographic plate. I base myself here not only on the comprehensive reports of Ruppelt and Kehoe, which leave no room for doubt in this regard, but also on the fact that the astrophysicist Professor Menzel has not succeeded, despite all his efforts, in offering a satisfying scientific explanation of even one authentic UFO report. It boils down to nothing less than this, that either psychic projections throw back a radar echo, or else the appearance of real objects affords an opportunity for mythological projections. Here I must remark that even if the UFOs are physically real, the corresponding psychic projections are not actually caused, but are only occasioned by them. Mythical statements of this kind have always occurred, whether UFOs exist or not. These statements depend in the first place on the peculiar nature of the psychic background, the collective unconscious, and for this reason have always been projected in some form. At various times, all sorts of other projections have appeared in the heavens beside the saucers. Have appeared in the heavens besides the saucers. This particular projection, together with its psychological context, the rumor, is specific of our age and highly characteristic of it. The dominating idea of a mediator and God who became man after having thrust the old polytheistic beliefs into the background is now in its turn on the point of evaporating. Untold millions of so-called Christians have lost their belief in a real and living mediator, while the believers endeavor to make their belief credible to primitive people, when it would be so much more fruitful to bestow these much-needed efforts on the white man. But it is always so much easier and more affecting to talk and act down to people instead of up to them. St. Paul spoke to the populace of Athens and Rome, but what is Albert Schweitzer doing in Lamborghini? People like him are needed much more urgently in Europe. Paragraph 784. No Christian will contest the importance of a belief like that of the mediator, nor will he deny the consequences which the loss of it entails. So powerful an idea reflects a profound psychic need, which does not simply disappear when the expression of it ceases to be valid. What happens to the energy that once kept the idea alive and dominant over the psyche? A political, social, philosophical, and religious conflict of unprecedented proportions has split the consciousness of our age. When such tremendous opposites split asunder, we may expect with certainty that the need for a savior will make itself felt. Experience has amply confirmed that in the psyche as in nature, a tension of opposites creates a potential which may express itself at any time in the manifestation of energy. Between above and below flows the waterfall, and between hot and cold there is a turbulent exchange of molecules. Similarly, between the psychic opposites there is generated a uniting symbol, at first unconscious. This process is running its course in the unconscious of modern man. Between the opposites there arises spontaneously a symbol of unity and wholeness, no matter whether it reaches consciousness or not. Should something extraordinary or impressive then occur in the outside world, be it a human personality, a thing, or an idea, the unconscious content can project itself upon it, thereby investing the projection carrier with numinous and mythical powers. Thanks to its numinosity, the projection carrier has a highly suggestive effect and grows into a savior myth whose basic features have been repeated countless times. This is the comment that makes me comment on Beto O'Rourke entering the presidential race today. Paragraph 785. The impetus for the manifestation of the latent psychic contents was given by the UFO. The only thing we know with tolerable certainty about UFOs is that they possess a surface which can be seen by the eye and at the same time throws back a radar echo. Everything else is so uncertain that it must remain for the time being an unproven conjecture or rumor until we know more about it. We do not know either whether they are manned machines or a species of living creature which has appeared in our atmosphere from an unknown source. It is not likely that they are meteoric. It is not likely that they are meteoric phenomena, since their behavior does not give the impression of a process that could be interpreted in physical terms. Their movements indicate volition and psychic relatedness, e.g., evasion and flight, perhaps even aggression and defense. Their progression in space is not in a straight line and of constant velocity like a meteor. but erratic like the flight of an insect and of varying velocity from 0 to several thousand miles per hour. The observed speeds and angles of turn are such that no earthly being could survive them, and any more such that no earthly being could survive them any more than he could the enormous heat generated by friction. The simultaneous visual and radar sightings would in themselves be a satisfactory proof of their reality. Unfortunately, well-authenticated reports show there are also cases where the eye sees something that does not appear on the radar screen, or where an object undoubtedly picked up by radar is not seen by the eye. I will not mention other, even more remarkable reports from authoritative sources. They are so bizarre that they tax our understanding and credulity to the limit. Paragraph 787. If these things are real, and by all human standards it hardly seems possible to doubt this any longer, then we are left with only two hypotheses, that of their weightlessness on the one hand and their psychic nature on the other. This is a question I, for one, cannot decide. In the circumstances, however, it seemed to me advisable at least to investigate the psychological aspect of the phenomenon, so as to throw a little light on this complicated situation. I have limited myself to only a few examples. Unfortunately, after more than 10 years' study of the problem, I have not managed to collect a sufficient number of observations from which more reliable conclusions could be drawn. I must therefore content myself with having sketched out a few lines for future research. Of course, next to nothing has been gained as regards a physical explanation of the phenomenon, but the psychic aspect plays a great role that it cannot be left out of account. The discussion of it, as I have tried to show, leads to psychological problems which involve just as fantastic possibilities or impossibilities as the approach from the physical side. If military authorities have felt compelled to set up bureaus for collecting and evaluating UFO reports, then psychology, too, has not only the right but also the duty to do what it can to shed light on this dark problem. The question of anti-gravity is one which I must leave to the physicists, who alone can inform us what chances of success such a hypothesis has. The alternative hypothesis that UFOs are something psychic, that is, endowed with certain physical properties, seems even less probable. For where should such a thing come from? If weightlessness is a hard proposition to swallow, then the notion of a materialized psychism opens a bottomless void under our feet. Parapsychology is, of course, acquainted with the fact of materialization, but this phenomenon depends on the presence of one or more mediums who exude a weighable substance, and it occurs only in their immediate vicinity. The psyche can move the body, but only inside the living organism. That something psychic possessing material qualities and with a high charge of energy could appear by itself in the air at a great distance from any human mediums, this surpasses our comprehension. Here our knowledge leaves us completely in the lurch, and it is therefore pointless to speculate any further in this direction. It seems to me, speaking with all due reserve, that there is a third possibility, that UFOs are real material phenomena of an unknown nature, presumably coming from outer space, which perhaps have long been visible to mankind, but otherwise have no recognizable connection with the Earth or its inhabitants. In recent times, however, and just at the moment when the eyes of mankind are turned upwards toward the heavens, partly on account of their fantasies about possible spaceships, and partly in a figurative sense because their earthly existence is threatened, unconscious contents have projected themselves on these inexplicable heavenly phenomena and given them a significance they in no way deserve. Since they seem to have appeared more frequently after the Second World War than before, it may be that they are synchronistic phenomena or meaningful coincidences. The psychic situation of mankind and the UFO phenomenon is a physical reality. As a physical reality, bear no recognizable causal relationship to one another, but they seem to coincide in a meaningful manner. The meaningful connection is the product, on the one hand, of projection, and on the other, of round and cylindrical forms which embody the projected meaning and have always symbolized the union of opposites. Paragraph 790. Another equally chance coincidence is the choice of the national emblems for aircraft in the USSR and the USA, respectively, a red and a white five-pointed star. For 1,000 years, red was regarded as the masculine and white as the feminine color. The alchemists spoke of the Cervus rubeus, red slave, and the femina candida, white woman. Their copulation produced the supreme union of opposites. When one speaks of Russia, one immediately thinks of Little Father Tsar and Little Father Stalin. One also remembers all the talk about America being a matriarchy because of the bulk of American capital is in the hands of women, not to mention Kaiserling's bon mot about the aunt of the nation. It is clear that these parallels have nothing to do with the choice of symbols, at any rate not as a conscious causality. Comically enough, we must say red and white are the nuptial colors. They throw an amusing light on Soviet Russia as the reluctant or unrequited lover of the femina candida in the White House, even if there is nothing more to it than that. Okay, so that's where he intended to stop on his essay, but he went on because there is an epilogue, and this still has 15 pages to go, but he's recounting a specific experience that a person had and who wrote a book called The Secret of the Saucers. And I am wondering whether I am online because I have a health stream that is not coming through. And so what does that mean? It says I'm live. I guess I will give it a try, and if it doesn't show up in the collection, let's just see. I think what I'm going to do is log off and log on one time to just see if I can improve the health of this stream. So please bear with me. I'll be back in just a moment. I'm going to stop streaming and then start again. Okay, I'm continuing with my final reading from Dr. Jung's essay, Flying Saucer, a Modern Myth. Flying Saucers, a Modern Myth. And the stream quality was very poor, So I've restarted it now, and hopefully this will be better, and I will begin to read now. And so this is, Dr. Jung is including this episode, this epilogue that he has. It's after he had written his essay. He's including it as a kind of joke, so you should take it as that. But he's going to get your attention, I assure you. Okay, so this is epilogue, paragraph 791. I had already completed my manuscript when a little book fell in my hands, which I ought not to leave unmentioned, The Secret of the Saucers by Orfeo M. Angelucci, 1955. The author is self-taught and describes himself as a nervous individual suffering from constitutional inadequacy. After working at various jobs, he was employed as a mechanic in 1952 at the Lockheed Aircraft Corporation in Burbank, California. He seems to lack any kind of humanistic culture, but appears to have the knowledge of science that exceeds what would be expected of a person in his circumstances. He is an Americanized Italian, naive, and, if appearances do not deceive us, serious and idealistic. He makes his living now by preaching the gospel revealed to him by the saucers. That is the reason why I mention his book. Paragraph 792. His career as a prophet began with the sighting of a supposedly authentic UFO on August 4, 1946. At the time, he had no further interest in the problem. He was working in his free hours on a book entitled The Nature of Infinite Entities, which he subsequently published at his own expense. He describes its content as atomic evolution, suspension, and involution, origin of the cosmic rays, etc. On May 23, 1952, he underwent the experience that gave him his calling. Towards 11 o'clock in the evening, he says, he felt unwell and had a prickling sensation in the upper half of his body, as before an electrical storm. He was working the night shift, and as he was driving home in his car, he saw a faintly red, glowing, oval-shaped object hovering over the horizon, which nobody else seemed to see. On a lonely stretch of the road, where it rose above the level of the surrounding terrain, he saw below him the glowing red disk, pulsating near the ground only a short distance away. Suddenly it shot upwards with great speed at an angle of 30 to 40 degrees and disappeared toward the west. But before it vanished, it released two balls of green fire, from which a man's voice issued, speaking perfect English. He could remember the words, quote, "Don't be afraid, Orfeo, we are friends," unquote. The voice bade him get out of the car. This he did, and leaning against the car, he watched the two pulsating discs hovering a short distance in front of him. The voice explained to him that the lights were instruments of transmission and reception, i.e., a species of sense organs, and that he was in direct communication with friends from another world. It also asked him if he remembered his experience of August 4, 1946. All at once he felt very thirsty, and the voice told him, "Drink from the crystal cup you will find on the fender of your car." He drank, and it was the most delicious beverage I had ever tasted, unquote. He felt refreshed and strengthened. The twin discs were about 3 feet apart. Suddenly the area between them began to glow with a soft green light, which gradually formed into a luminous three-dimensional screen. In it, there appeared the heads and shoulders of two persons, a man and a woman, being the ultimate of perfection. They had large, shining eyes, and despite their supernatural perfection, they seemed strangely familiar to him. They observed him and the whole scene. It seemed to him that he was in telepathic communication with them. As suddenly as it had come, the vision vanished, and the fireballs reassumed their former brilliance. He heard the words, quote, "The road will open, Orfeo," and the voice continued, "We see the individuals of Earth as each one really is, Orfeo, and not as perceived by the limited senses of man. The people of your planet have been under observation for centuries, but have only recently been resurveyed. Every point of progress in your society is registered with us. We know you as you do not know yourselves. Every man, woman, and child is recorded in vital statistics by means of our recording crystal discs. Each of you is infinitely more important to us than to your fellow earthlings, because you are not aware of the true mystery of your being. We feel a deep sense of brotherhood towards Earth's inhabitants because of an ancient kinship of our planet with Earth. In you, we can look far back in time and recreate certain aspects of our former world. With deep compassion and understanding, we have watched your world going through its growing pains. We ask that you look upon us simply as older brothers." The author, paragraph 695. The author was also informed that the UFOs were remote controlled by a mothership. The occupants of the UFOs needed in reality no such vessels. As etheric entities, they needed them only in order to manifest themselves materially to man. The UFOs could travel approximately with the speed of light. Quote, "The speed of light is the speed of truth," unquote, i.e., quick as thought. The heavenly visitors were harmless and filled with the best intentions. Cosmic law forbade spectacular landings on Earth. The Earth was at present threatened by great dangers. The Earth was at present threatened by greater dangers than was realized. After these revelations, Angelucci felt exalted and strengthened. It was as though momentarily I had transcended mortality and was somehow related to these superior beings. When the lights disappeared, it seemed to him that the everyday world had lost its reality and become an abode of shadows. On July 23, 1952, he felt unwell and stayed away from work. In the evening, he took a walk, and on the way back, in a lonely place, similar sensations came over him as he had felt on May 23rd. Combined with them was the dulling consciousness I had noted on that other occasion, i.e., the awareness of an abaissement de nouveau mental, a state which is very important, a state which is a very important precondition for the occurrence of spontaneous psychic phenomena. Suddenly, he saw a luminous object on the ground before him, like an igloo or a huge misty soap bubble. This object visibly increased in solidity, and he saw something like a doorway leading into a brightly lit interior. He stepped inside and found himself in a vaulted room about 18 feet in diameter. The walls were made of some ethereal mother-of-pearl stuff. Facing him was a Facing him was a comfortable reclining chair consisting of the same translucent, shimmering substance. Otherwise, the room was empty and silent. He sat down and had the feeling that he was suspended in air. It was as if the chair molded itself to the shape of his body of its own accord. The door shut as if there had never been a door there at all. Then he heard a kind of humming, a rhythmical sound like a vibration, which put him into a kind of semi-dream state. The room grew dark, and music came from the walls. Then it grew light again. He found on the floor a piece of metal like a coin. When he took it in his hand, it seemed to diminish in size. He had the feeling that the UFOs were carrying him away. Suddenly, something like a round window opened, about 9 feet in diameter. Outside, he saw a planet, the Earth, from a distance of over 1,000 miles. As a voice he recognized explained to him, he wept with emotion, and the voice said, quote, "Weep, Orfeo, we weep with you for Earth and her children. For all its apparent beauty, Earth is a purgatorial world among the planets evolving intelligent life. Hate, selfishness, and cruelty rise from many parts of it like a dark mist," unquote. Then he says the craft evidently moved out into cosmic space. From the window, he saw a UFO about 1,000 feet long and 90 feet thick, consisting of a transparent crystalline substance. Music poured from it, bringing visions of harmoniously evolving planets and galaxies. The voice informed him that every being on Earth was divinely created, and upon your world the mortal shadows of those entities are working out their salvation from the plane of darkness. All these entities were either on the good side or on the bad. We know where you stand, Orfeo. Owing to his physical weakness, he had spiritual gifts, and that was why the heavenly beings could enter into communication with him. He was given to understand that the music, as well as the voice, emanated from his huge spaceship. It moved off slowly, and he noticed at either end of it vortices of flame that served as propellers, but they were also instruments of seeing and hearing through some method of telepathic content. Paragraph 797. On the way back, they met 2 ordinary UFOs traveling earthwards. The voice entertained him with more explanations concerning the attitude of the higher beings to mankind. Man had not kept pace morally and psychologically with his technological development, and therefore the inhabitants of other planets were trying to instill into the Earth dwellers a better understanding of their present predicament and to help them, particularly in the art of healing. They also wanted to put Orfeo right about Christ. Jesus, so they said, was called allegorically the Son of God. In reality, he was the Lord of the flame, an infinite entity of the sun, and not of earthly origin. As the Sun Spirit, who sacrificed himself for the children of woe, he has become a part of the oversoul of mankind and the world spirit. In this, he differs from all other cosmic teachers. Everyone on earth has a spiritual unknown self which transcends the material world and consciousness and dwells eternally outside of the time dimension in spiritual perfection within the unity of the oversoul, unquote. The sole purpose of human existence on earth is to attain reunion with the immortal consciousness. Under the searching eye of this great compassionate consciousness, Orfeo felt like a crawling worm, unclean, filled with error and sin. He wept once more to the accompaniment of appropriate music. The voice spoke and said, "Beloved friends of earth, we baptize you now in the true light of the world's eternal," unquote. A white flash of lightning blazed forth. His life lay clear before his eyes, and the remembrance of all his previous existences came back to him. He understood the mystery of life. He thought he was going to die, for he knew that at this moment he was wafted into eternity, into a timeless sea of bliss. After this illuminative experience, he came to himself again, accompanied by the obligatory etheric music. He was borne back to Earth. As he left the UFO, it suddenly vanished without a trace. Afterwards, on going to bed, he noticed a burning sensation on the left side of his chest. There he found a stigma the size of a 25-cent piece, an inflamed circle with a dot in the middle. He interpreted this as the symbol of the hydrogen atom. Paragraph 800. His career as an evangelist dates, true to form, from this experience. He became a witness not only of the word but of the UFO, and was exposed to the mockery and disbelief that are the lot of the martyr. On the night of August 2 of the same year, he saw, with 8 other witnesses, an ordinary UFO in the sky, which disappeared after a short time. He betook himself to the lonely spot he had previously visited, but though he didn't find the UFO, he met a figure who called out to him, "Greetings, Orfeo." It was the same figure he had seen in the earlier vision, who wished to be called by the name of Neptune. He was a tall, handsome man who, with unusually large and expressive eyes. The edges of the figure rippled like water in the wind. Neptune gave him more information concerning the earth, the reasons for its lamentable conditions, and its coming redemption. Then he vanished. Paragraph 801. At the beginning of September 1953, he fell into a somnambulistic state, which lasted about a week. When he returned to his normal consciousness, he remembered everything he had experienced during his absence. He had been on a small planetoid where Neptune dwelt with his companion Lyra. Or rather, he had been in heaven as Orfeo imagined it, with countless flowers, delightful odors, colors, nectar, ambrosia, noble etheric beings, and of course, almost incessant music. There he discovered that his heavenly friend was not called Neptune, but Orion, and that Neptune had been his own name while he was still dwelling in this heavenly world. Lyra showed him particular marks of attention, to which he, the remembered Neptune, in accordance with his early nature, responded with erotic feelings, much to the horror of the celestial company. When he had dehabituated himself with some effort from this all-too-human reaction, a noche celeste was celebrated, a mystic union analogous to the conjunctio oppositorum in alchemy. With this climax, I will end the account of this pèlerinage de l'âme, without having the faintest inkling of psychology. Angelucci has described in the greatest detail the mystic experience associated with a UFO vision. A detailed commentary by me is hardly necessary. The story is so naive and clear that a reader interested in psychology can see at once how far it confirms my previous conclusions. It could even be regarded as a unique document that sheds a great deal of light on the genesis and assimilation of the UFO mythology. That is why I have let Angelucci have his say. Paragraph 803. The psychological experience that is associated with the UFO consists in the vision of the rotundum, the symbol of wholeness, and the archetype that expresses itself in mandala form. Mandalas, as we know, usually appear in situations of psychic confusion and perplexity. The archetype thereby constellated represents a pattern of order which, like a psychological viewfinder marked with a cross or a circle divided into four, is superimposed on the psychic chaos so that each content falls into place and the weltering confusion is held together by the protective circle. The Eastern mandalas in Mahayana Buddhism accordingly represent the cosmic, temporal, and psychological order. At the same time, they are yantras, instruments with whose help order is brought into being. Paragraph 804. As our time is characterized by fragmentation, confusion, and perplexity, this fact is also expressed in the psychology of the individual, appearing in spontaneous fantasy images, dreams, and the products of active imagination. I have observed these phenomena in my patients for 40 years and have come to the conclusion that this archetype is of central importance, or rather that it gains in importance to the degree that the importance of the ego is lost. A state of disorientation is particularly apt to depotentiate the ego. Psychologically, the rotundum, or mandala, is a symbol of the self. The self is the archetype of order par excellence. The structure of the mandala is arithmetical, for whole numbers are likewise archetypes of order. This is true particularly of the number 4, the Pythagorean tetratis. Since a state of confusion is generally the result of a psychic conflict, we find in practice that the dyad, the conjoined two, is also associated with the mandala. This appears in Angelucci's vision of the synthesis of opposites. Paragraph 806. Its central position gives the symbol a high-feeling value, expressed, for instance, in Angelucci's stigmatization. The symbols of the self coincide with the God images, as for instance the complexio oppositorum of Cusanus with the dyad, or the definition of God as a circle whose center is everywhere and whose circumference nowhere, with Angelucci's sign of the hydrogen atom. He was marked not by the Christian stigmata, but by the symbol of the self, of absolute wholeness, or, in religious language, God. This psychological connection gave rise to the alchemical equation between Christ and the lapis philosophorum. Paragraph 807. The center is frequently symbolized by an eye, the ever-opening the ever-open eye of the fish in alchemy, or the unsleeping God's eye of conscience, or the all-seeing sun. The same symbols are experienced today not as external light phenomena, but as psychic revelation. I would like to mention as an example the case of a woman who wrote down her experience in verse form. It had no connection with UFOs. Vision. Light strikes the pebbled bottom of a deep blue pool. Through swaying grass, a jewel flickers, gleams, and turns, demands attention as I pass. A staring fish eyes glance attracts my mind and heart. The fish, invisible as glass. A shimmering silver moon, the fish assumes shape and form, evolves a whirling, swirling dance, intensity of light increasing. The disk becomes a blazing golden sun, compelling deeper contemplation. Paragraph 808. The water is the depths of the unconscious into which a ray from the light of consciousness has penetrated. A dancing disk, a fish's eye, swims down below in the inner darkness, instead of flying in the heavens. And from it arises a world illuminating sun and ictus, a sol invictus, an ever-open eye which reflects the eye of the beholder as at the same time something independent of her, a rotundum that expresses the wholeness of the self and cannot be distinguished except conceptually from the deity. Fish, ictus, and sun, novus sol, are allegories of Christ, which, like the eye, stand for God. In the moon and sun appear the Divine Mother and her Son lover, as can still be seen today in many churches. Okay, hold on just a second. It says I have bad video settings. Okay, let me see if I can change the settings. Just a moment. I'm not seeing where those video settings go, unfortunately. Okay. Okay, I'm sorry for the delay. I'm just trying to correct something about this feed. I don't seem to have anybody on the feed in any case. So Okay. I'm looking for the correct settings again. For some reason. Oh, I don't understand why this is happening. I'm writing down keyframe, frequency, settings. Need to be 4.0, whatever that means. Okay. I'm going to disconnect for a moment and then try to reset the feed. Maybe that seemed to have worked at one time earlier, so hopefully I'm just recording a video on my own computer at the moment and you're not sitting there waiting for me to do something. Okay, I'm sorry, but I'm going to disconnect just for a moment to get a better stream health, and I'll be right back. Okay, we're back online, and hopefully you can see this video stream now. I'll do my best to finish this essay. I am recording at home, so hopefully I'll be able to edit it in the future. I apologize for the inconvenience. Okay, so I'm on paragraph 809. The UFO vision follows the old rule and appears in the sky. Orpheo's fantasies are played out in an obviously heavenly place, and his cosmic friends bear the names of stars. If they are not antique gods and heroes, they are at least angels. The author certainly lives up to his name, for just as his wife, née Borgianini, is in his opinion a descendant of the Borgias of unhappy memory, so he, an earthly copy of the angels, and a messenger bringing Eleusinian tidings of immortality, must style himself a new Orpheus, divinely appointed to initiate us into the mysteries of the UFO. Not even the Orphean strains are lacking. If the name is a deliberately chosen pseudonym, we can only say it was a good idea, but if it appears in his birth certificate, then the matter becomes more problematical. Today, we can no longer suppose that a magical compulsion attaches to a mere name, else we should have to attribute a correspondingly sinister significance to his spouse or the anima. Much as we would like to credit him with an intellectually rather limited, naive good faith it might be suspected that a fine Italian hand is at work. What appears impossible from the conscious standpoint can often be arranged by the unconscious with all the craftiness of nature. Be that as it may, Orfeo's book is an essentially naive production, which for that very reason reveals all the more clearly the unconscious background of the UFO phenomenon, and therefore comes like a gift to the psychologist. The individuation process, the central problem of modern psychology, is plainly depicted in it in an unconscious, symbolical form, which bears out our previous reflections, although the author, with his somewhat primitive mentality, has taken it quite literally as a concrete happening. Paragraph 810. This epilogue was already in the press when I received word of Fred Hoyle's book, The Black Cloud, 1957. The author is a well-known authority on astrophysics, and I was already acquainted with his two impressive volumes, The Nature of the Universe and Frontiers of Astronomy. They are brilliant expositions of the latest developments in astronomy and show their author as a bold and imaginative thinker. The fact that such an author should resort to a science fiction story aroused my curiosity, and I read the book at once. Hoyle himself, in his preface, describes it as a frolic, a jest, and warns against anyone identifying the views of his hero, a mathematician of genius, with his own. No intelligent reader will fall into this error, of course. Nevertheless, he will hold Professor Hoyle responsible for the authorship of his book, and he will ask what it was that induced him to tackle the UFO problem. In his yarn, Hoyle describes how a young astronomer at the Mount Palomar Observatory, while looking for supernovae in the south of Orion, discovers a dark circular patch in a dense field of stars. It is a so-called globulus, a dark cloud of gas, which, it transpires, is moving toward our solar system. At the same time, in England, considerable disturbances are detected in the orbits of Jupiter and Saturn. The cause of this is calculated by a Cambridge mathematician, the hero of our story, to be a definite mass, which, it then turns out, is located exactly at the spot where the Americans discovered the black cloud. This globulus, whose diameter is approximately equal to the distance of the Sun from the Earth, consists of hydrogen of fairly high density and is moving straight towards the Earth at 40 miles a second. It will reach the Earth in about 18 months. As the black cloud gets nearer, it causes, first of all, a terrible heat that kills off a large part of the life on Earth. This is followed by a total extinction of light and a more than Egyptian darkness lasting for about a month, a negredo like that described in the Aurora Consurgens, a treatise ascribed to St. Thomas Aquinas. Quote, "Beholding from afar, I saw a great cloud looming black over all the earth, which had absorbed the earth and covered my soul." Unquote. Paragraph 812. When the light reappears again, there follows a period of terrible cold, which causes another appalling catastrophe. Meanwhile, the scientists in question have been shut up by the British government in their experimental location where, thanks to the security measures they have taken, they survive the catastrophes. By observing certain remarkable ionization phenomena in the atmosphere, they come to the conclusion that these are intentionally induced and that, in consequence, there must be an intelligent agent in the black cloud. By means of radio, they succeed in entering into communication with it, and receive answers. They learn that the cloud is 500 million years old and is at present engaged in regenerating itself. It has taken up its position near the sun in order to recharge itself with energy. In fact, it is feeding on the sun. The scientists discovered that the cloud must eliminate all radioactive substances, as these are harmful toward it. This fact is also discovered by the American observers, and at their instigation, the cloud is fired at with H-bombs with the intention of killing it. The cloud, meanwhile, has settled in a disk round the sun, consequently threatening the Earth every 6 months with eclipses of several weeks' duration. The English naturally have a host of questions to ask the cloud, including the metaphysical question concerning the great being of still greater age and even deeper wisdom and scientific knowledge. The cloud replies that it has already discussed the matter with other globuli, but is as much in the dark about it as human beings. It is willing, however, to communicate its own greater knowledge directly to mankind. A young physicist declares himself ready to submit to the experiment. He gets into a hypnotic condition, but dies in a sort of inflammation of the brain before being able to make any communication. The Cambridge mathematician of genius now offers himself for experiment on the condition accepted by the cloud that the process of communication shall take place very much more slowly. In spite of that, he falls into a delirium which ends in his death. The cloud, however, has decided to quit the solar system and seek out another region of fixed stars. The sun emerges again from obscurity and everything is as before, except for the tremendous destruction of earthly life. That's a cheery story. Paragraph 813. It is not difficult to see that the author has here taken up the UFO problem as characteristic of our epoch. From outer space, a round object approaches the Earth and causes a worldwide catastrophe. Although the legend usually considers the catastrophic political situation, or rather nuclear fission, to be the indirect cause of the UFO phenomenon, there are not a few people who suspect that the real danger lies in the appearance of the UFOs themselves, namely an invasion of the Earth by star dwellers, which might give an unexpected and probably undesirable turn to our already questionable situation. The strange idea that the black cloud possesses a sort of nervous system and a psyche or intelligence to match is not an original invention of the authors, since speculative UFOologists have already arrived at the hypothesis of a sentient electrical field, and also at the idea that the UFOs are provisioning themselves with something on the Earth, water, oxygen, small organisms, etc., just as the cloud charges itself with solar energy. Paragraph 814. The cloud causes opposite extremes of temperature and an absolute nigredo, such as the old alchemists dreamed of. This illustrates a characteristic aspect of the psychological problem, which arises when the light of day consciousness is directly confronted with night, the collective unconscious. Opposites of extreme intensity collide with one another, causing a disorientation and darkening of consciousness, which can assume threatening proportions, as in the initial stage of a psychosis. This aspect, i.e., the analogy with a psychic catastrophe, is depicted by Hoyle as the encounter between the psychic content of the cloud and the consciousness of the two unfortunate beings. Of the two unfortunate victims. Just as earthly life is largely wiped out by the collisions with the cloud, so the psyche and the life of two scientists are destroyed by the collision with the unconscious. For although the rotundum is a totality symbol, it usually encounters a consciousness that is not prepared for it and does not understand it. Indeed, is bound to misunderstand it and therefore cannot tolerate it, because it perceives the totality only in projected form outside itself and cannot integrate it as a subjective phenomenon. Consciousness commits the same grave mistake as the insane person, It understands the event as a concrete external happening and not as a subjective symbolical process. The result is that the external world gets into hopeless disorder and is actually destroyed insofar as the patient loses his relationship to it. The author suggests the analogy with psychosis by the delirious state of the professor. It is not only the insane person who makes this fundamental mistake, but all those who take philosophical or theosophical speculations for objective realities and consider the mere fact that they believe in angels as a guarantee that such things exist in reality. Paragraph 815. It is significant that it is the actual hero of the story, the mathematician of genius, who meets with disaster. No author can avoid equipping his hero with some of his own qualities and thus betraying that at least a part of himself is invested in him. What happens to the hero also happens symbolically to the author. In this case, it is naturally unpleasant, for it amounts to nothing less than the fear that a collision with the unconscious would involve the destruction of the most differentiated function. It is a widespread, in fact, a normal prejudice that deeper insight into unconscious motives must necessarily entail a fatal disturbance of the conscious performance. The most that can happen is an alteration of the conscious attitude, since in our story everything is projected outside. Mankind and all organic life on Earth suffer an immense loss. The author makes no particular to-do about this. It is mentioned only as a sort of byproduct. From this, we may infer a predominantly intellectual attitude of consciousness. Presumably not altogether unimpressed by 100 or more H-bombs, which might well upset its nervous system with their radioactivity, the black cloud withdraws as suddenly as it came. Nothing whatever has been learned of its contents, except that it knows as little about a metaphysical supreme being as we do. Nevertheless, its intelligence proves unendurably high for human beings, so that it becomes suspiciously near to having a divine or angel-like nature. Here the great astrophysicist joins hands with the naive Angelucci. Paragraph 817. Understood psychologically, the story is a description of fantasy contents whose symbolical nature demonstrates their origin in the unconscious. Whenever a confrontation of this kind occurs, there is usually an attempt at integration. This is expressed in the intention of the cloud to remain for some time near the sun in order to feed on its energy. Psychologically, it would mean that the unconscious draws strength and life from its union with the sun. The sun loses no energy, but the earth and its life, signifying man, lose a great deal. Man has to pay the price for this invasion or eruption of the unconscious. His psychic life is threatened with the gravest injury. Paragraph 818. What then, psychologically speaking, is the meaning of this cosmic or rather psychic collision? Obviously, the unconscious darkens the conscious, since no rapprochement, no dialectical process takes place between their contents. For the individual, this means that the cloud deprives him of solar energy. In other words, his consciousness is overpowered by the unconscious. This is equivalent to a general catastrophe, such as we have experienced in National Socialism and are still experiencing in the communist inundation, where an archaic social order threatens our freedom with tyranny and slavery. Man replies to this catastrophe with his best weapon, whether for this reason or from a change of mind, as seems more likely. The cloud withdraws to other regions. This means psychologically, the unconscious, after gaining a certain amount of energy, sinks back again to its former distance. The final outcome is depressing. Human consciousness and life in general suffer an incalculable loss through an incomprehensible lusus naturae that lacks all human meaning, a frolic on a cosmic scale. This in turn points to something psychic that is not understood at present. Though the nightmare is over for the survivors, from now on they live in a devastated world. Consciousness has suffered a loss of its own reality, as though the evil dream had robbed it of something essential and made off with it. The loss consists in missing a unique opportunity, which may never occur again, to come to terms with the contents of the unconscious. Although it was possible to establish an intelligent connection with the cloud, the communication of its contents proved to be unendurable and led to the death of those who submitted to the experiment. Nothing is learnt of the contents from the other side. The encounter with the unconscious ends bootlessly. Our knowledge is not enriched. On this point, we remain where we were before the catastrophe. The only thing is that we are at least half a world poorer. The scientific pioneers, the spokesmen of the avant-garde, proved too weak or too immature to receive the message from the unconscious. It remains to be seen whether this melancholy outcome is a prophecy or a subjective confession. Paragraph 820. If we compare this tale with the naiveties of Angelucci, we get an invaluable picture of the difference between the uneducated and the scientifically educated attitude. Both shift the problem to a concrete plane, the one in order to make us believe in saving action from heaven, the other in order to transform this secret yet somewhat sinister expectation into an entertaining literary joke. Both poles apart though they are activated by the same unconscious factor and make use of essentially the same symbolism in order to express the unconscious straits we are in. Okay, this was a diagnosis on our current situation. Okay, so that now there's a supplement, and this too is interesting, and this is where the midwich cuckoos come in. So paragraph 821, supplement. Another recent book, a novel by John Wyndham called The Midwich Cuckoos, attributes to a thing, which is obviously a UFO, a highly significant character. Of unknown but presumably extraterrestrial origin, this thing casts a spell on a small, remote English village, causing man and beast to fall into a hypnotic sleep. which lasts for 24 hours. The zone of sleep describes a circle round the village, and any living being that approaches instantly falls asleep when the magical line is crossed. After 24 hours, everybody revives and nothing seems to have happened on the surface. Several weeks later, peculiar discoveries are made. First one and then another of the female population, and finally all its members capable of fecundation, are found to be pregnant. In due course, children are born with golden eyes. When they develop, they begin to show signs of uncommon intelligence. Later, it becomes known that the same miracle has befallen a village in Siberia, an Eskimo settlement, and an African village. In England, owing to the remoteness and insignificance of the locality, the village authorities succeed in hushing up a public scandal. The extraordinary intelligence of the children inevitably leads to trouble, and a special school is founded for them. The amazing fact is discovered that if one of the boys has learnt something new and hitherto unknown, all the boys know it, and the same is true of the girls, so that only one boy and one girl have to attend school. Finally, the perspicacious schoolteacher can no longer doubt that the children with golden eyes represent a superior type of Homo sapiens. Their advanced intelligence is moreover coupled with a complete realization of their potential power for world domination. The question of how to deal with this menace leads to different solutions. The Africans kill the children immediately. The Eskimos expose them to the cold. The Russians, after isolating the village, destroy it by bombardment. But in England, the favorite teacher introduces some boxes apparently containing laboratory equipment, but actually containing dynamite, into the schoolroom and blows himself up with all the children. The peculiar parthenogenesis and the golden eyes denote kinship with the sun and characterize the children as divine progeny. Their fathers seem to have been angels of the Annunciation who had come down from a super celestial place to take care of the stupidity and backwardness of Homo sapiens. It is divine intervention that gives evolution a definite push forward, or, to put it in more modern terms, an advanced species of man from some other planet visits the Earth in order to make biological experiments with mutation and artificial insemination. But the modern Neanderthal is in no way ready to renounce the prerogatives of the ruling race and prefers to maintain the status quo by the devastating methods which have always been his final argument. It is obvious that the sun children, miraculously begotten, represent an unexpected capacity for a wider and higher consciousness, superseding a backward and inferior mental state. Nothing is said, however, about a higher level of feeling and morality which would be necessary to compensate and regulate the possibilities of advanced perception and intellect. Characteristically enough, this aspect does not seem to enter the author's field of vision. It is sufficient for him that the children have a definite advantage of some kind over contemporary man. What if the children should symbolize the germ of some higher potentiality transcending the hitherto valid form of man? In that case, the story looks very like a time-honored repetition of the hero's threatened childhood and his early death through treachery. On the other hand, there is something definitely suspect about these children. They are not separated individually, but live in a permanent state of participation mystique, or unconscious identity, that precludes individual differentiation and development. Had they been spared an early extinction, they would have founded an entirely uniform society, the deadly boredom of which would have been the very ideal of a Marxist state. Thus, the negative end of the story remains a matter for doubt. Okay, so that completes the reading of Dr. Jung's essay on flying saucers. It's only taken quite a bit of time to read it, but I have done it, and it's 120 pages. I urge you to go back and listen to all of the now 8 videos that I've completed on this essay, because Dr. Jung has used this essay as a way to talk about many of the features of his psychology generally. He was 82 years old when this was published, and so therefore he probably was intending this as a kind of summation of his career in many ways, and so it makes for a very interesting read. I feel chastened by the fact that I didn't previously think I should spend much time on this essay, but now that I've read it aloud, I recognize its importance, and so I urge you to watch all the segments, and particularly segment 5, which has portents for modern current affairs, political psychology, because there we can recognize 2 archetypes that are emerging in American politics today. The first one is an anima savior figure in the form of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and the other is a savior archetype in the form of Beto O'Rourke. And what's happening is both of them are emerging from the collective unconscious, and they're emerging very much in large part because they're being attacked by the GOP, which is much to their advantage. So I expect them both to rise to the surface of American politics very quickly, and that's already happening, of course. And so it's a very interesting story, and it relates specifically to this essay and the 5th video that I did a few days ago. So I hope you enjoy the whole essay, and I hope you have enjoyed it. This one I will probably not post immediately because I was having very poor connectivity earlier, and so I'm not sure how much of it got properly recorded on YouTube, and I may have to edit the recording on my computer. So anyway, I look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye.